Fun. Welcome to another episode of A Podcast. Your host, Stephen Maxted here. And today we have, how to we start this. I had an idea before I was doing this. I would call it like longtime friend, former colleague, Denis, and we're with What the Futures podcast today, but we're going to cover a few things on your storyline or our storyline a little bit. And yeah, but throwback, we met at a ag tech startup at FBN Canada, and
Yep.
part
Yep.
of the, I guess, the original founding team from my end of things. And you were not short after part of that mix with your company actually that came in. I know we'll get more into that today a little bit. That was a very exciting time. Historically, work-wise, I would just comment for myself. I know that also was an exciting time for you too, with your company.
Yep.
Yeah, I would say it was like the most fast-paced work experience I think I'd had. But anyways, listener, welcome to this episode. And Brian, why don't you tell a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your story to get us started off here.
Well, I think we got to go back to where we met as well, because I can't remember the name of the bar specifically, but I think we were like formally introduced like after I think I drove through like a snowstorm in Kananaskis
I can't
and
ask
then
us. Yep.
went down to the bar for stress relief. So yeah, that was good. Our first journey there at FBN. Um, That was a really fun couple days actually to get things kicked off. But yeah, I guess I'll tie back into my FBN days here in a little bit. And when it comes to my intro, I can get a little bit long-winded. I can start from being a small child all the way to now at almost 40 years old. But I live just outside of Edmonton, Alberta, with my wife Chantel and our two kids, Willa and Finn. Um, I haven't always lived in Alberta. We moved in 2017, and the story is kind of maybe comical to some, maybe to Oilers fans. You can see, I got Ryan
Yes,
Smith in the
Mitty.
background here, but the Oilers went on like obviously a deep playoff run in 2016, close to winning the cup, and and Chantel and I were just dating at the time. And she said, "Hey, I want to move to Edmonton to go to school. Um, what do you think?" And I was like, "Phew, Edmonton, yeah, the Oilers just about won the cup. My favorite team. I'm good. Let's make the move to Edmonton. I'll figure it out." And so we moved. And then Edmonton didn't make the playoffs for like 10 years after that. So the decade of darkness kicked in. Um, so I'm a farm kid from Dormy, Saskatchewan. My dad, my brother farm just north of 10,000 acres, and I've been a part of agriculture my entire life, just like any other farm kid. We had all sorts of animals on the farm, grain farm. My dad's the youngest of 10 kids. Just about everybody farmed, and so now my dad's approaching 60, I guess, and his brothers and his siblings have all retired, so his farm and my brother's farm have just expanded in a big way here over the last 4 or 5 years. So I'm not sure if that's a common story across the prairies right now or not, but it's how our family farm has evolved here over the last little while. I've worked in agriculture my whole life. My first job was organizing a chem shed and mixing fertilizer right at the local independent. I went to the University of Saskatchewan. I had a fantastic time, too good of a time. My bar tab, I think I paid it off like, 6 years ago. That's what my student loan was called. The
That's
biggest
awesome.
bar tab I've ever had. And I had a great time at university. But we moved to Edmonton. I worked for a local John Deere dealership here off the start, and ended up going into a grain buying role with Viterra. Um, Remy Michaud took a chance on me and said, "Hey, you're a farm kid. You don't know anything about grain, but we'll get you there." And they told me to sit at the corner of the other buyer's desk for 2 weeks and not move. And so Brad, my good buddy Brad, kind of taught me the ropes there. And so I bought grain for a couple of years. which was a lot of fun. And I'll kind of get back to that maybe a little bit later on in the episode. But from there, I got an opportunity to become a grain marketing consultant or advisor. Moved over to Cargill and did that for 4 years, and worked with about 30 customers in the Edmonton region, we'll call it, and really had fun consulting with farmers. I took a lot of pride in the role, as many advisors do, and basically kind of found my niche, I guess I'll call it. I loved going to work every day, but in 2015 I decided to do it for myself. So I basically started Full Acre Consulting, and went independent. My farmers at the time were just looking for that continued independent advice, I guess you'd want to call it. And so I started Full Acre, and things just kind of took off. It was just me, and then in January of 2018, I hired an admin, which I thought was going to help with my workload. I was working with about 40 farmers at the time, and she was really good at marketing, not as great on the admin side, but really good at like promoting a brand. And so the business just took off. And so in like the fall of 18, we hired another advisor, and we were working on like 100 farms. We were into Saskatchewan, Northwest Saskatchewan, Northeast Alberta, and the list was just growing and growing, and I couldn't keep up. I had to hire more people. And that was the time that FBN called and said, "Hey, we have crop marketing in the US. We'd like to get something going in Canada. We heard what you're doing, and we like what we hear. Let's have a conversation." And I remember getting the phone call. I was driving between farms down a back road. It was snowing. It was December, and I was like, "I don't know who you are. I don't know. You might have the wrong number. I have no idea what's going on here, but I'm
Oh
just
my
going
gosh.
to push this off." And I told them, whatever, let's talk another day. So of course we both know Tom
Hmm.
really well, and
Yep.
he was persistent. He called again in January and said, "Well, come meet us at the farm show in Saskatoon." And I was like, "Yeah, okay." And I didn't show up. I just never showed up for the dinner meeting. So I wasn't doing a good job of engaging with them at the time. We were expecting our first child um, in 2019, and unfortunately, Eva was born in March and passed away shortly after. And that was a moment where I just had to reevaluate life at that time. Just working like a madman for a lot of years, excited about being a new dad and starting a family. And, when you lose that opportunity at that time, and lose that child, it just turns you a complete 180. It felt like I got hit by a truck. And,
Yeah.
and yeah, I realized at that time that, if I was running a successful business, but um, it was kind of just me and a small team, and there was more to life. And sure, we were doing a good job and stuff, but there was more to life. So I re-engaged with FBN later that spring, and ended up meeting with them down in California, and they acquired Full Acre in the summer of 2019, which led us to our meeting in
Yeah, the
Canada
fall meeting.
that fall. That's September, I think.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it it certainly not a path that uh, everyone takes, I guess. Um, but when I had that life changing moment, I decided to engage with FBN and figure this out. And I hired a team of financial people. You have your accountant and your lawyer, and you have your financial planners, and I just noticed how excited everybody was about this opportunity for Chantal and I. And the one investment banker said a stat that really stuck out, and he said, Ryan, 4% of small businesses actually get acquired. 4%. I don't know where he pulled that stat from, but 4% is not a lot. And so we were in a very fortunate position and started to look big picture and and made the journey over to FBN, to Farmers Business Network, which was, a great experience over there as well. So to speed this up a little bit, I was with FBN for 3 years. I managed both the Canadian advisors and for a time the US advisors, grew that program, and I fulfilled my agreements in August of last year, and we welcomed our son Finn in January of 2023. So I took the time off. I honestly just disconnected for over a year, and it's been great being at home with the family, and now looking at next opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a funny throwback moment you described there too about Tom. Anyone who's familiar with the ag industry may have worked with Tom Staples. I got a very similar call. I remember at that stage of interacting, it was a little bit of a different connection from a recruitment company who, so ironically, I met that guy years later at a trade show who hired most of us on the like original team
Yeah.
prior to you joining us and stuff, and it was pretty interesting. To chat with him afterwards what that looked like. That's, I don't know, different storyline, but yeah, I remember having a similar conversation actually, probably for what you described there with Tom about joining the team, and I'm like, is this real? I remember at one point I was like,
Yeah.
are you really offering me this job? Like it just seemed like such a neat opportunity. It truly was, and still is. Good stuff they're doing over there to market disrupt. It was very exciting behind the
Oh
scenes in
yeah.
that original team, and I remember that event. And I forget the name of that bar too, but it was in Kananaskis. So anyone listening who knows that
And it
can
was
DM us.
a September snowstorm, I'm positive.
Yep,
Yeah.
I remember I got back and I had a gazebo thing in my backyard, and we had a storm like across the prairies that
Yeah.
fall. It was heavy wet snow, and I came back. Literally, this gazebo thing collapsed because of a tree with all this wet, heavy snow. Everything was just so much weight on this thing. My backyard
Yeah.
looked like I'd been through, I guess, what would be like a winter hurricane
Yeah.
situation. Everything was destroyed. Barbecue, gazebo thing, squished furniture. It was quite the scene to come back to. But yeah, I definitely remember that trip. That was, I think I'd already been with them for a little bit, yeah, before
Yeah.
you joined in there, but it wasn't far after. I think joined that spring. Then we got going, and there was, yeah, lots of change that happened with that fast-paced tech growth at that time in ag
I
too.
can't remember my employee number, but it was, I think I was maybe
Yeah,
like 19 or something. Like I
in
was,
Canada.
yeah.
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 Huh. I can't remember what I was. Top 10, whatever
Top
that
10.
was.
I think it's
I
top
think I
10.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, somewhere in there. It was to the first 10 folks, I'm pretty certain, or close to that. So yeah, I went that
Yeah.
far off. It's funny. Yeah, it's interesting how we have those moments that'll look alike on for us and make us think differently about what's truly important. We hear lots of stuff on different social media platforms about family first, blah blah blah. Almost seems like rah
Yep.
rah stuff, but I think until you go through probably the emotions of having something close to home change, whether it be you know it's kind of close to related to like a health concern in a way, and if if something happened in a family um, that's altering, it's pretty substantial what that'll change for your perspective and how you show up every day to work. You know,
It does, and it obviously does, right? And I remember again, like, I had these 4 or 5 people helping me make this decision. And so that one stat they threw out was 4% of small businesses actually get acquired. And that was one thing. But then they talked about, businesses similar to mine and what tends to happen as that business matures and that individual gets older. And the
right?
majority of the time, it led to a health concern or something like that. And that business basically just kind of imploding to some degree, or just
Totally.
being not acquired, but the customers just kind of getting scattered to whoever was available,
Yeah.
and not not actually moving that business along. And so that
Yeah.
was interesting. And yeah, they said, a health situation happens, and then you're kind of forced to make a decision, and it's just not favorable. And depending on what industry you're in, what you're doing, you're just kind of caught. And so I thought, you know what, let's not be that, um, and figure this out. So yeah, it was
Yeah.
good.
That
And
is
yeah,
that's an interesting side. I can definitely see that from other life experiences and actually working with a company that um you could almost like see that happening. It's kind of tough to hand off a business when it's um they may even mention like some of this language with that, but the difference between like a lot of companies that have you run the company, you've created a company for sure. That's what you're doing, but you've also low key just created a job for yourself. It's not truly like a functioning business. Like if you were to, like you said, vanish, famous,
yeah,
there's still you're the main piece in that puzzle to
yeah,
keep things going. And it's awesome to do when everything's running well. But how do you, scale that to be in a spot where it can be sold or people are getting taken care of it? It's definitely like that next step in progression, and it's neat to see that you're able to do that within being acquired by another company and then still be a part of it as part of those contracts do go. So that's awesome.
yeah,
Very cool.
yeah. I think about changing gears a little bit, but you think
Yeah.
about like even think about like our family farm, right? So like the farm business out there, you like I think of my dad being the youngest of 10 kids and that
Yeah.
succession, and then I see my brother there, kind of the next succession, and that it's an interesting business because there's that opportunity out there that exists for some. And then, other than that, um, you're renting it out, you're selling it, you're getting, you're liquidating, and there's a bunch of people putting their hand up to say, "Hey, yeah, I'm in. What what can I farm or whatever?" And so that's very unique as well. And consulting, working with a group of clients like that, it's just obviously totally different.
Yeah. No, it definitely is unique in ag to think that way about the farm and how it gets passed along and how important it is actually to talk about succession planning within that business. I don't know that we do it well enough or have as much thought in other businesses. And from just my limited life experiences, but um, the amount that I've heard people talk about like succession planning, in general, is pretty limited in many cases, right? People
Mhm.
either think that they're going to live forever or just don't want to talk about it. It's uncomfortable and it's kind of like a weird thing to bring up. But if you are thinking of that, you know, generations down the road, which you kind of have to on the farm because it's usually generational growth, and that's why you're still farming. It's not many people getting into farming, as we were talking about before about the age thing. And
Yeah.
I know everyone. I tell them I got the computer here open on the other screen to run my own research, but I know a few years ago, and I'm just curious to Google this again here. What the average age, or I don't know if you happen to know this, of a farmer
Of a
is.
farmer?
Yeah,
Oh, I want to say like high 50s, but
I'm
maybe
Price
it's
is Right style. I'm thinking it's closer to. Oh, okay. Hold on, wait. Okay, well, this is like US. Oh, average age of Canadian farmers. Okay, live update. The drum roll. It is 56 years
56.
of
There we
age,
are.
is what it
Yeah.
says. Yeah, so it must have
Yeah.
dropped down. I feel like it was closer to 60 last time I even talked about this, but maybe people are passing down like what you just said there, like your brother and like, you have a few people that are at the top closer to 70, 80, hanging onto the farm, still kind of in charge, but then that does get passed down, even though it,
Yeah.
probably on paper they were, leading the farm, but actually having that passed down.
Yeah.
Huh,
The succession
interesting.
planning is, I don't know how much I'll get into it on the What the Futures podcast here as we get going, but it's a very delicate conversation, and very, very obviously personal. And I've been part of it, right, with our family farm. My parents, they we all got together with an advisor and figured this out. Um, and a lot of, family farms are doing that continuously as well. But you have just such a major asset, and you try to figure out what the next steps are and how to pass it off um, as best you can without too much, financial consequence or whatever, tax consequence. I don't know what the right way to
Yeah.
say it would be.
No,
And
for sure.
and I notice a few examples where this is changing a little bit, where um, the farm that is approaching retirement is treating it like they're part of their financial portfolio, and saying, hey, how can I take this investment and what type of return can I get? And actually seeing situations now where like a farm manager is hired and brought in, and they manage, the farm, the ROI, and what that farm's going to return. And the person that owns it is retiring, or they might chip in a little bit here and there, but they're retiring or retired. And this
Yeah.
farm manager is doing it. It's pretty neat, actually, to watch. I know a few situations like that. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I have seen that before when yeah, going back in the like egg chem days of Dow, and then I mean FBN got into that too in the future, and it was interesting to see how that did happen a few times. I remember, well, I'm based out of Winnipeg here, but on Highway 2, there's this guy that did that, and he was almost at the point of too where he was retiring from farm managing. But the people who own the farm, they were not. I don't think that they were local. They bought the farm years ago. Some of the family lived here, but they were actually not. Yeah, not local. They did a great job. They had great crops, and they had a whole team that worked there. So it wasn't,
yep,
yeah, your traditional family running the whole operation. It was more business savvy and doing that. Yeah, I've heard some different things too. Even a guy will probably have him on this podcast. Has just been busy with this summer, but more like kind of super unique too. I don't think this is super common, but like fractional selling of land, like very small pieces of like land on like a text setting. I don't even understand how all that really works. Um, but yeah, kind of different ways to diversify, like you said, the
yep,
business, because it's so unique in that way that there's heavy investment on capital in land and equipment, and that's a tough thing to balance sometimes um, on the books. So
yep. Um, I I was going to say, when it comes to, actually, if we can, maybe we'll switch gears here a little bit to
yeah,
podcast
yes.
that I got coming out. As far as talking about succession planning, just kind of getting my gears going here a little bit. Yeah. Um, but anyway, so we're talking about farms transitioning. We're talking about succession planning, things like that. So I obviously I'm on here. I'm launching What the Futures podcast here shortly in
Yes.
November, and I've done like my past is crop marketing and giving advice, right? And I want to sell commodities and so on and so forth. So back in like 2017, I just recorded like on my iPhone just a quick little audio update. It was May. Farms are busy planting crops, right? And so I thought, oh, let's just see if people actually like this. And so I recorded this really rough audio and then recorded like 1,000 more because people did like them. Um, and so I don't think we could really call it a podcast back then, but started doing these audio updates. I used to do like a couple a day, and then I got like, kind of more creative with them. I'd throw like a song in, and then all of a sudden I'd start talking about crop input pricing or all sorts of different topics, right? And so that just kind of evolved. And one thing when we moved over to FBN, we actually started our like a legit podcast, right? And so I
Yeah.
got to do that for 3 years, and I had like a proper intro and everything. And I've been away now for just over a year. And the one thing that, as I met farms across the prairies, because I used to, cover Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Peace region, we would show people what we were doing, and we'd let them, listen to the podcast for a couple weeks or whatever. And people liked
Right.
it. People appreciated it. And so I've been, away from work here for just over a year, and thinking about what could I do to, kind of get back in, and that's where the podcast just kind of naturally popped into my head one day this summer, and I was like, yeah, I could get back to recording and putting out some content, and yeah, I just started to think about that and get the wheels in motion for what the future's. And
Yeah.
so we're getting to a position here where launch is just a couple of weeks away. I bought a microphone, so that's good, and got a
Right on.
laptop now, so it's coming, and so I'm excited to start putting together content, and where I tie this in um, with succession and with farmers retiring is a long way to do this full circle.
It's like a comedy skit where they
But
come at the end and they're like, all right.
here we go, zing.
So yeah.
So I'm 38. A lot of my buddies are in their 40s, and I was just asking, like, where are you guys getting your info from right now? Like, how are you absorbing like content? And it was surprisingly overwhelming, like how many people were tuning into podcasts.
Right.
Like, to sit down and, like, when I started doing this, we used to fax our market updates out. I remember faxing them out. I'm not that old,
Yeah.
right? And we were faxing these things out, and then we would put together a 30-page report, and we'd send that out once a month, and
Yeah.
we'd sit there and say, how come only like 12% of the people read the report? And
Yeah.
well, yeah, it's 30 pages. Nobody wants to read 30 pages. Um, we tried to shorten it up to 10 pages. Like, again,
Even that.
there's a
Yeah.
time and a place, but farmers are busy. And so, my buddies in farming, everyone's listening to podcasts. It's obviously a growing thing. You've jumped on, Stephen, with what we're doing today with your podcast, right? Like, it's just a
Yeah.
way
You bet.
that we absorb information now. I listen to podcasts every day. Um,
Yeah.
all sorts of podcasts now. And so anyways, in Western Canada, we I'm not the expert on this, but I'd say we do a really great job on covering like big picture stuff and policies and lots of agronomy talk and lots of grain marketing stuff as well. Like, it's all out there. There's a lot. But I want this podcast to be specific to Western Canadian farms. I, of course, will talk about all the major stuff going on, but I want to tell you what's going on with prices, in your backyard. Who's got the best opportunities out there? Why you would consider it or not. Um, the other day I was chatting with a fellow who was making a fertilizer decision, and he was getting all his urea quotes, and we were talking about it, and the spread between the high and the low on his urea quotes was like $80 a ton, I think.
Wow.
Huge, huge. and
Yeah.
and so I you know I look forward to bringing a little more transparency around to the industry as well. That's what I've enjoyed about my role over the last decade, is just talking about what's impacting farmers' decisions out there, and just bringing
Mhm.
light to what we're seeing in the space. Farmers have always told me they love a sense of community, and we used to do it all the time. Before prior to 2020, where we'd get together for workshops and get people together, and we do that as well now. It's coming, of course. Um, but farmers always like getting together and talking about what's going on in in their areas, and they love hearing perspective from other areas as well. And
Totally.
so I, over my, career, have met a lot of farms in a lot of different areas, and I hope to bring that network to the podcast and present those ideas every week. Talk about what's happening, and we're gonna have some fun as well. I like to keep things pretty light and even a bit silly at times. And so yeah, we'll talk about what's going on with crop pricing and what's going on with headlines and what's going on with inputs. But we'll try to get some farmers asking questions as well.
Okay.
We'll highlight maybe some used farm equipment out there. I'm going to interview farm equipment is what I've been saying, which
Oh, that's
you'll
awesome.
see. You'll see how it comes out. But we're going to have some fun with it. And then, of course, we'll have special episodes that, dive into specific things as well. And,
That's
I
great.
hope that people can listen to the podcast and take something away. Maybe it helps them make a decision in the next week or two or whatever, and hopefully they like what they hear and they tune in a couple more times after that.
That's awesome. Well, I think maybe something just to like note on there, and as I mentioned, again, just saying this out loud, but I have the website on here and running their own research, but you have a cool function on here. And I'll just like lay the land on the website real quick, but it looks like you're gonna have blog posts coming out. Like you said, equipment listing. So it's just caught my eye in the corner here.
Yeah,
And then you have a shop with some merch and a little bit about us, contact us. But the neat thing outside of the contact us is there's send a voicemail on here. Um, Tell us what's going on there. I know the story,
yeah,
but tell
yeah,
us what you guys can do because I think this is just so cool that you mentioned almost how you started kind of doing the podcast prior. Um, it almost looks like that, but what's up with the send voice note or voicemail situation?
yeah. If you go to the website, you click the button, and very easily from your phone, you can record a message that'll come directly to me. You can ask me a question. I'll say like about anything. Like if you ask me like relationship advice, I'll just Google it or something and get you some answers. But
What's
let's say
trending? Yeah.
you're sitting here, you're it's mid-October, you're wrapping up your fall work, and you're wondering, hey, what's a oh, well, maybe we'll pick on urea again. What are your urea prices doing? And I
Sure.
can answer you directly. Easy. I hit the button on my side, record my voicemail, send it back to you. But I also want to play some of those um,
Right.
on the podcast and then answer them on the podcast. So I'll play it,
Very cool.
answer it, you tune in, you get your answer. And I can't announce any partnerships quite yet, but we do have a pretty significant prize coming for those that submit their voicemails. There's going to be get your name in a hat and a couple of cool prizes given out every month as well. So just a way to
That's awesome.
connect, right? Like
Absolutely. I
try
think
to
that's so
connect.
cool. I mean, like we kind of going out of order a little bit from what we talked about before, but
Yeah.
there's a
Oh yeah.
multitude. You have all the social medias in the top of the website here. What the Futures pod or what the Futures podcast. A couple of them have variations. So Twitter has some limitations, I think, for making them
Yeah.
consistent. I've seen that on my end and stuff too. But on the website, you can click and go all those. But it's neat to interact on those platforms, but it's extra neat, as proper English should go, to be able to connect directly with you like that through your website. I think that's such a neat function. I hadn't seen that before on a website. You have the help button and contact us, but to be able to reach out
Yeah.
directly to you, and I think to your point too, folks who are listening to the podcast, um, they instantly could go to your website, send you a note for one of the following episodes, and folks love to throw on headphones and listen to those conversations. If it's something, a topic that they want to listen or have an opinion on, maybe too, which is great. They're probably half participating. I know I've been there before and been like, oh, that's stupid, listening or whatever, or oh yeah, like that's bright. I'm gonna go type in that
Yeah.
promo code or check out this other
Yeah.
company. Um,
Yeah.
Everyone's got an opinion on different things, and with farms, there's multitude of, you know, variations on the farm, whether that be grain or cattle or mixed, as the term would go there. And then within the varieties that they have of both the crop and what kind of cattle they run, or different livestock, on that end of things, you could really dive in. To some specifications. But I just think that send the voicemail thing on here is so cool. How you can interact with your listener and audience in a very intimate way. So encouraging people to go do that. Send Ryan a note, test it out.
Send me a note. Like Stephen, I've spent my career, and what I love is like getting these like problems or questions and solving them or coming up with an answer, right?
Yep.
So I've traveled the prairies. I've met farms from everywhere, and even today, there's farms that will just send me a text or send me a message with just want to touch, check in and just they might have something on their mind that they want to talk about. Like I had a couple of really neat ones actually lately. Like I had a farm who had an opportunity to expand his acre base by like 50%. And so just sent me like, this is what's being offered to me, and here's the price points. Here's what rent looks like or whatever. And so I just worked through the scenario with him, and anyways, it was just fun to do. Like it helps me stay rooted as well and engaged, and like I get to talk to farmers from all the way up in the Peace region, all the way to southern Saskatchewan, Manitoba. It's great, and I know we have Twitter and social media and all that stuff, but you can't be face to face. Number one, like if you can, like especially with farming and with how I like to work, face to face is great.
Yep.
But then from there, if you can pick up the phone, have a conversation, right? It's just
yeah.
So that's where the voicemail thing comes in.
No, 100%. I mean, I do a little bit of a throwback there in my mind of a funny situation. I was probably pushing the limits on using social media earlier on and some tech stuff in my early egg days, to the point of people would do want to see you. Remember I had this farm, we had an issue back when I was with Dow at the time. Once in a while, somebody would come up. Spray didn't work perfect, or not sure if it is working. They wanted to have us come out and take a look at it. And this guy called me, and I was just like, and like FaceTime was kind of new, but I suggested to him that we FaceTime because it's a 3-hour drive to get to him. You would have thought I asked him something really very obscure and personal, like that was wrong, because I got a call from my boss shortly after about like that suggestion to do that. It was just kind of a funny thing. So yeah, the face to face is non-replaceable for many reasons of reading body language and other things. But I was just trying to save myself the drive and see if we could look at it via video. And that was definitely like a no-go from the other end of the business too. So there's the want and desire to have someone come out, and it wasn't that I didn't care. It was just I was just doing the math on, hey, there's this new thing we could video call. Obviously we had a heightened use of that in the last couple of years, but prior to that it was kind of a fun.
Yeah, now you ask that. Now
it's like normal
pops up, and it'd be like, here.
Yeah, come look at my field. Like this is what's up. Yeah. At
Actually,
the time,
I got
it was
drone up right now. Give me a second here.
yeah, could you imagine? Actually, that would definitely be the case. A lot of folks do have drones now. They could send you a whole look at the field, be like, "Hey, this is where the wild oats are," or this is where we have this will not really controlled as much, whatever the situation may be. But yeah, it was kind of funny. But no, I think that's awesome. You have that in there. What do you have coming up, Brian? I know that we mentioned just before we got on the call here, there's some events that you have rolling up.
Yeah. Well, first of all, if you're going to be in Red Deer at Agri-Trade on Thursday, I think it's November 9th, right? Pretty sure it's November 9th.
8. Yeah, 9 and 10. I think I can Google that here too.
Make sure I did this right. Yeah, Thursday, November 9th. We're hosting a bit of a launch party. It's honestly just a creative way to buy beer and write it off if we can. But come down for a beer at Troubled Monk is the brewery from 1:30 to 4:30. If you we are in, I used to call it the church, but it's called the cellar apparently, and space is limited, so we can maybe we could throw a link somewhere, Stephen, for the Eventbrite ticket.
Yeah, for
Free
sure.
tickets, obviously, just to get your name in there because space is limited. But I'll buy you a beer. We can chat farming, um, and we'll have some merch on hand as well, and just kind of celebrating the launch that week. We'll try to drop as many episodes as we can that week and start to build this up
Awesome.
and hit the end of the year running. And then from there, we hope to be heading out to a couple other farm shows in Saskatoon and maybe head out to Brandon as well if we can. And we'll get those details out as we can. But off the start, I just want to put together some really strong content. So I'm going to dive into the research side a little bit more off the start here and see
Mhm.
what key themes are impacting farms heading into 2024. I know, again, my my dad and my brother, unfortunately, they unfortunately get my opinions all the time, and I've been a pretty big bear in these markets, and not happy with what I'm seeing, and so they kind of get my negativity right now. Um, and but I do think that 2024 is going to be a challenge. I don't think if you farm
Yeah.
and you're listening to this, you're just like, oh yeah, it's going to be a challenge. We have expensive, input costs, expensive everything, right? And we
Yep.
have a commodity market that is in a downtrend, and it always rallies. There's markets go up and down. Um, but reality is, mid-October now in 2023, there's a lot of farms undersold. Um, Yields are better than expected with those drought conditions we had for many, not for all, but for many.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of selling that's going to happen here as well. So it's going to be, in my opinion, a bit of a tough winter, and um, farms are going to have to be very, as always, on top of it in 24 to squeak out some margin here because it's 2021 was brutal. 2022 was fantastic
Yep.
for margin. But we do have some tough, seems like we have some tough times coming. So I hope that my little podcast can help again make some of those decisions. Maybe maybe I can help put a few extra nickels in the bank account. We'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's great insight even for just chatting about, yeah, in general trends that your keen eye is seeing out there, and just having regular conversation. It sounds like, we could be wrong here too, but you're going to have some folks on uh, farms and the industry in general to talk about how things are going and what that perspective truly looks like from their end and in their
Yeah.
seat, so people have a good understanding of what that really looks like, because I know sometimes it's hard to put yourself in the other side of the desk, signing too formal at the office, whatever that looks like within the industry. And I think it'll be very helpful to, yeah, have that said again. Sometimes we forget that there's people on the other side of the desk, both sides. It's not just the
And,
business.
and I've got some partners lined up. We'll have some weather folks join us. We'll have specialty crops, experts come in. We've got
Awesome.
I'm building our deck of roving reporters around the globe. But we got a Russian Ukraine contact. I hope to get something solidified here in Australia and South America as well. It all takes time.
Oh, very cool.
And but I also, I again, it's a podcast, but I really do believe in the farm community and the sense of community, and I do want farmers to drive the direction of the show as well. So
Awesome.
through voicemails and interactions, I'm going to
Yeah.
pick up the themes of what people want to hear about or what the concerns are, and kind of drive towards those. So I have like a playbook in my mind for the year, what I want to cover, but I know that things will happen and we'll just be shifting to that at least temporarily, and we'll get back to our regular scheduled programming, or however you want to call
Well,
it. Yeah.
I mean, I think that
So
kind of speaks to you having experience running a business before too, with that comment, because as much as you can have the best business plan out there, written on paper until it's in play. It's kind of pretty fluffy because things will happen regardless of your plan, and it'll impact the decisions that you have to make. That's really cool that you have that perspective in terms of including the farm and understanding that things outside of where you're headed are going to be included in the topic thing. So kind of keeping those areas open, to have other conversations that we don't know about today. We don't know what your RIA is going to do, and maybe that becomes a non-topic in like a month from now. Maybe it won't be. Maybe it'll be bigger.
Oh, yeah.
You might have more thoughts on that
Exactly.
specific. But
exactly, there's so much going on around the world, right?
Yeah.
Right now that everything's very very fluid, and you might give an opinion today, and you might pull that back next week and say, you know what, actually, these factors changed, and now we're thinking completely opposite. So it's interesting times for sure.
That's awesome. Well, and I think just to recap this, as I think we're kind of coming to the end here, Ryan, is just
did we miss anything?
I don't know. I looked down at my notes here, my rough stuff. I think we covered most of it, although I feel like we could have chatted for much longer on here. It's we'll do a 2.0 in the future here.
Yeah.
I think we covered most of it. On my end thing, I think the important thing that we'll push out on our end too is that you have an event coming up November 9th out in Red Deer at AgriTrade, and you'll be at AgriTrade as well, to keep that included in the comments here for part of that show. And stay tuned. If you are in ag or farming specifically, leave a voicemail note through the website. And we're excited to see and follow the journey too. It was fun to have another podcast on on our podcast to help get that going, and it was great to have that discussion ahead of time.
I'm gonna throw one more thing in here, just kind of like a funny thing, but just speaking of AgriTrade real quick. And so, of course, like a podcast, I don't know how to promote a podcast, right? So I like reach out to the folks over there. I'm like, hey, what can you guys recommend for me? I want to like promote this. And they're like, well, we have a waiting list for a booth. I'm like, okay, so no booth. And they're like, you can put something in print. And I'm like, okay, so I'll put something in print promoting the podcast. And they're like, we've never done it before, but we could give it a shot. So we did it. We'll have a little blurb in the AgriTrade booklet or whatever that goes out. But it's funny when you talk to people about promoting. They're just it's still fairly new, right?
Yeah.
And so I appreciate the opportunity to come onto your show here and have a deeper discussion, and it's exciting what you got going on as well, and I'll keep tuning in to the podcast. So
well, we appreciate that. It's exciting we can help promote your show here. We haven't had lots of Western Canadian ag folks join us yet, but maybe this spins off into touching in that space too. We're trying to capture the up and coming businesses in the space and help them grow ultimately. So that was
awesome.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ryan, for joining us today.
Stephen.
And
Appreciate
we'll talk to you soon.